Khamzat Chimaev is just about the fastest rising star in the UFC right now. He's considered one of the best on the sports roster and has wasted no time climbing the rankings. But there are plenty of things you might not know about him. Did you know that he almost retired in 2020? Or that one of his close teammates was in prison for years? Stay tuned for all of that, plus more, coming right up. First, Khamzat Chimaev. You haven't been paying attention if you don't know his name by now. The Chechnya-born Swede is on his way to becoming the sport's next global superstar, and his background is just as impressive as his UFC results. He trained in wrestling from a young age, finishing third at the Junior Russian Wrestling Championships. He was motivated by a hard childhood and is said that wrestling was his way to escape from it. And after moving to Sweden, he decided to get serious about fighting. He was still just a teenager but became more dedicated than ever. Chimaev won back-to-back gold medals at the 2016, 2017, and 2018 Swedish National Championships and built up a 24-fight win streak and is still undefeated. Much like other fighters with Russian roots, Boris has proven himself to be untouchable in a battle of strength. He didn't contain himself to wrestling, he also competed in judo tournaments and combat sambo fights. If that wasn't enough, he switched weight classes throughout his wrestling career, something that he's more than willing to do in MMA too. In Sweden, he brushed shoulders with the likes of Alexander Gustafsson and Reza Madadi, so it's no surprise that he went on to win his first 3 amateur fights before going pro. And he didn't slow down one bit. In his first year, he notched up 4 wins before being picked up by the UFC a year later. Next, what fight inspired him? Khamzat has revealed what his initial inspiration was for MMA. He was just 21 years old, and like many of us, he caught one of the biggest fights of the decade on TV. As he was taking a break from work, he tuned in to UFC 194, which was headlined by Conor McGregor and Jose Aldo. McGregor was well on his way to global superstardom, but that fight cemented it. With a 13-second knockout of the reigning champion, McGregor took the featherweight title and made a big statement. But watching on the other side of the world in Sweden, Chimaev wasn't so impressed. Talking about the moment, he said, "If the guys make so much money, like millions, why can't I do it now? I'm a fighter, I'm a warrior, and I have something special inside of me." That is the moment when he committed himself to finding a way into the sport and showing to the people that he could do what these big stars were doing. And looking at his record so far, he has more than proven himself. By now, he should be making millions too. If that's not an inspirational story, then what is? If you have a dream and determination, you too can make it into the UFC. Well, you also need to be a world-class fighter, but some are just born with it. Next, Chimaev almost called it quits. Back in 2020, Khamzat was booked for the biggest fight of his career. It was against Leon Edwards, who's now the middleweight champion of the UFC. Unfortunately, bad luck was about to hit Chimaev like never before. In the build-up to the fight, he tested positive for COVID-19 and had to pull out. But that wasn't even the worst of it. He tried to keep training to keep himself fit and ready, but within days, he was put in hospital with chest pain, muscle pain, and a high fever. That led to the fight being rescheduled, but it wasn't enough. Chimaev was still suffering from the long-term effects of COVID. When he returned to sparring, he said that he coughed up blood after 1 round of training. That's when he shocked the fighting world with an Instagram post. In it, he said, "I think I'm done. I may upset you, but my heart and my body tell me everything." He went on to thank everyone for their support, but said that his health concerns were just too much. Fortunately for fight fans, Chimaev did end up making a full recovery and has only gotten better. It looks like we'll have to wait just a little while longer for that matchup with Leon Edwards. And now that Edwards is champion after knocking out Kamaru Usman, it might be some time. There could be a rematch between the two, or Chimaev could be next in line. It all depends on how Usman's recovery's going. Up next, why does Khabib think Chimaev needs more Muslims around him? And how did he spark a brawl at UFC 280? So don't go anywhere. Chimaev is a Muslim. When Khamzat missed weight for UFC 279, he was criticized far and wide. And one legend of the sport said that it was because he wasn't religious enough. If you don't know already, Chimaev is Muslim. And as a fellow Muslim, former champion Khabib Nurmagomedov had a few things to say about it. Hitting the right weight is a big part of being an MMA fighter. Most professionals employ nutritionists and dietitians to make sure that they cut weight safely and pump themselves back up before their big fight. That's why Khabib thought it was inexcusable, but he also blamed the company that Chimaev keeps. He said, "If you're a Muslim, you should have good people around you. There are no Muslims around him, and this is very bad." But Reza Madadi, who's been Chimaev's teammate since his amateur days in Sweden, has told Khabib that that's just not true. In an Instagram post, Madadi said that Chimaev has plenty of Muslim friends and teammates in his camp. He also took the time to give credit to Khabib for everything he had done for representing Muslims in the sport. But Madadi also referred to mistakes he had made in the past, which is a little-known secret. The Iranian-born fighter was arrested in 2013 for burglary of $150,000 worth of products. He even spent 14 months in prison before he was released. So out of all of the people to jump to Chimaev's defense, maybe Madadi wasn't the best choice. A big heart. Fighters make their names by being tough in the octagon, but that doesn't mean they can't have a sweeter side to them, and Khamzat Chimaev definitely has a soft spot. He's not in the fight game for himself. After making sure his family were in good positions financially, Chimaev now dedicates much of his time to charity efforts. In a YouTube video, he can be seen handing out clothes to homeless people in Stockholm, Sweden. He says that it's important to give back to the community and that he feels blessed to be in the position he's in. He's always willing to help other Chechnya and Dagestani fighters who are looking to make it to the big stage. Next, brawling at UFC 280. After Islam Makhachev comfortably beat Kevin Holland at UFC 280, all hell broke loose. In the crowd supporting Makhachev were his teammates, which include Khabib Nurmagomedov and his cousin Abu Bakr. On a night that should have been a celebration of the biggest win of Makhachev's career over Charles Oliveira, more action was going on in the stands. Tensions between the Chimaev and Makhachev camp had been bubbling for months now, and UFC 280 was the last straw. It's not clear what exactly lit the fuse, but footage captured Chimaev talking with Abu Bakr before pushing each other and throwing punches. On the inside of the cage, Khabib was doing his best to stay out of it. Luckily for everyone, there were plenty of big security guards ready for this exact scenario. The two camps were separated from each other, but not before a few more words were yelled across the hall. Fans were in disbelief as they saw firsthand some of the sport's biggest names tussling outside of the octagon. After the event, Khabib called the incident nonsense and apologized for how it represented everyone. A follow-up post showed all of them meeting together and seeming to make amends. "We hugged and inshallah, and I hope that in the future we'll only gather and fight for good reason." One man who wasn't surprised by the beef was UFC President Dana White. He said that these things happen. Maybe in your world, Dana. Chimaev still undefeated. Chimaev is still undefeated, but the scariest thing about him is his willingness to fight anyone at any time. In 2020, he broke the record for the quickest turnaround time between fights, with just 10 days separating a submission win over John Phillips and a TKO of Reese McKee. Impressed yet? He went on to beat number 2 ranked middleweight Gilbert Burns over 3 rounds and was matched up with outgoing veteran Nate Diaz before missing weight. Kevin Holland stepped in to fight Chimaev at short notice, and it took less than 1 round for the Swede to get the job done. While some called into question his professionalism for missing weight, there's no denying that he's one of the deadliest fighters in the sport right now. Do you think Khamzat Chimaev is destined to be world champion, and who should he fight next? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again in the next one.